Australia creates 60,000 new jobs, adding pressure for higher interest rates. BHP wants to extend the life of one of the biggest coal mines in the country as part of its efforts to go green. And China moves to take greater control over iron ore prices, putting pressure on local miners. It's Friday, the 17th of June, 2022. Welcome to Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael. I'm in a very good mood this morning.
Oh, why? Do I dare ask, actually?
Well, you know I'm going on holidays. I'm going to Hawaii with a couple of the kids in a week or so, and we've been having all sorts of trouble with the passport office actually getting passports. We've had them in our application in for about 9 or 10 weeks now, and we've only got about a week before we go. Anyway, in the last 24 hours, the people from the passport office, very nice, very friendly, under a lot of pressure, have actually said that we will get our passports on time. But we just want, like many people who are going away for the school holidays that are coming up, are having real trouble getting passports out of the office. And I waited on a queue for 2 hours the other day, but I got through, and the guy that I spoke to was very friendly in that. Oh, wow. Very relieved.
Oh, I tell you what, some of the pictures of those queues outside passport offices, and I imagine then the virtual queues kind of waiting on the phone would be much the same, just horrendous. And so you got to admire the people at the passport office who are kind of working under that kind of pressure as suddenly everyone goes, hey, we can leave the country. Let's do it all at once.
Yep. They must be harassed nonstop. Now, I did wait on the phone for 2 hours, 9 minutes before it answered the other day. I haven't quite finished that because I have to go to the office to pick up the passport. Oh. I'm worried about the 4-hour line. Anyway, we'll see how we go.
Well, you know what? It makes the holiday just that little bit more rewarding when you got to go through these epic trial before you can get to it. It will make it so much more satisfying when you're sitting on that plane. Do you know what kind of plane you're flying on? I'm a bit of a plane fan.
I think it's a Dreamliner, a 787.
Oh, that would be fun.
Yep.
Anyway, Enough about planes, enough about passports, enough about holidays, because I'm getting just a touch jealous. We've got a really good interview coming up after the show today, Sean. Carlos Cacho, who's one of our favourite economists. He's from Jarden, Australia.
That's right. He gives us a big run through about what's going on in the local economy, and there is so much going on. I reckon Carlos is a bit tired. I reckon that he's probably worked non-stop for about 3 months. He probably needs a break. He should be going to Hawaii, you know?
That's right. Maybe he could join you and your family.
No.
Okay. All right. We'll just put that suggestion to one side. But really, that is the main story this morning. Not Carlos Cacho, not your holiday, not the passport office, but it is the economy. Another 60,000 jobs were created last month, and while the unemployment rate was unchanged at 3.9%, the participation rate hit a record.
Yes, it's a hot labour market at the moment. Full-time employment was up more than 69,000, while part-time employment was off 8,700. The net effect was 60,600 new jobs in May. Pretty much all the data yesterday was good. Hours worked rose and underemployment fell to 5.7%. That's the equal lowest since 1991. The unemployment rate remains at its lowest level since 1982, and all the job indicators suggest that will fall in coming months, possibly to around 3.5%. Now, Michael, it would be good to enjoy the good economic news after the week we've had without mentioning the bad stuff. But that's just not how economics works, I'm afraid.
No, it's not. Please go on.
The bad news is that the strong labour market will push up wages as businesses fight for staff. And we already saw the minimum wage jump 5.2% earlier this week. That in turn puts pressure on inflation and on interest rates. Market economists expect the Reserve Bank to lift the official cash rate by another 50 basis points when it meets in just over 2 weeks' time.
Sean, we've had so much economic news this week. There's been falling consumer confidence, a big hike in interest rates in the US, an appearance on the ABC by Reserve Bank Governor Philip Lowe, and more. For most of us, we care about having a job, how much it costs to live, and what we pay on our mortgage.
Okay, so let's take those three things. Having a job, tick. People can get a job at the moment, and arguably that's the most important factor in keeping an economy growing. What was the second one? Cost of living. Cross probably. Petrol prices, energy costs, fruit and vegetable prices are higher. They won't be coming down anytime soon. Mortgage payments, double cross. By the end of this year, variable mortgage rates, according to economists, will be around 6%. Back of the envelope calculation, by the end of 2022, people will be paying somewhere between $700 and $750 more each month on a $500,000 home loan over 25 years compared to what people were paying at the start of the year. So if you have $1 million mortgage, you're paying around $1,500 extra each month. Ouch.
That is a big, big difference. And just briefly, Sean, though, a special mention to the fact that you've invented a new kind of category. You've got your tick, your cross, and then the double cross, which I've never heard that before. So that's a new one for me. Sean, how did local markets perform yesterday?
The S&P ASX 200 was in the black for most of the day before closing down 0.2% to 6,591 points. That's yet another new low since late 2020. The banks were poor. Investors are worried about growing bad debts as interest rates rise. Westpac fell nearly 2%, while ANZ and Commonwealth Bank were both lower. The big miners were mixed. Telstra outperformed again at 1.3%, while Newcrest Mining, South 32 and WiseTech Global all did pretty well. Cochlear, QBE Insurance and Transurban were among the worst performing large caps. The worst performer on the day was Link Administration Holdings. More of that in a moment. The best performer was Appen Group, up nearly 6%, just days before it exits the top 200.
And what about international markets?
Well, the reverberations from the US Federal Reserve's decision to lift interest rates by 75 basis points yesterday morning continue. It was the biggest rate hike since 1994, and Chair Jerome Powell signalled a similar move at the next meeting. But, and it's a significant but, he doesn't expect such big hikes to be common, and he does expect that the US economy will achieve a soft landing, which is economic speak for no recession. Not everyone agrees with him, and 24 hours after he made that decision, markets are somewhat sceptical. But just the fact that he said there'll be 2 big rate hikes and not many more after that calmed investors somewhat. That helped the local bond market, and yields fell, and the Aussie dollar rose. It's currently trading around 70 US cents.
Okay, we'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, I mentioned this one at the start of the show, and it really is intriguing. BHP wants to close Australia's largest thermal coal mine about 15 years before the resource runs out.
Yes, this is fascinating. BHP is proposing to continue operating the Mount Arthur coal mine in the Hunter Valley in New South Wales until 2030, and then close the site and rehabilitate the land, effectively meaning no one else can mine it. The decision comes after BHP failed to find a suitable buyer for its coal assets in New South Wales, which had hoped to offload, just like it sold its petroleum business. What it's asked for is a 4-year extension on the Mount Arthur mine before closing it completely. Thing is, the site could mine coal for decades beyond 2030. So the New South Wales government must now clarify if it's happy to shut the mine in 2030 or whether it should look for another operator. All this as energy prices surge and blackouts are a real threat for the site. Closing the site in 2030 will also trigger about 2,000 job losses, and plenty of royalty revenue for the state will disappear. BHP's made it clear it takes its net zero promises seriously, notwithstanding it wants to keep its New South Wales coal division for 4 years longer. The New South Wales government now has to decide whether it does as well and what that means for power in the state. A really fascinating story.
Sean, while we're on the topic of the energy crisis, there are some pretty annoyed energy operators around, given the regulator took control of the market on Wednesday, and the boss of one of the country's biggest coal producers blamed efforts to accelerate the demise of coal for the problems.
Yes, he sort of has a point, definitely. Whitehaven Coal's CEO Paul Flynn said the efforts to de-emphasise coal from the national electricity market and increase generation from wind and solar certainly won't eliminate any concerns about reliability. The crisis in the market is due in part to about 25% of Australia's coal generation being offline due to faults and maintenance. Mr. Flynn said that was a consequence of trying to accelerate the decline of more traditional energy sources, according to the Financial Review. Meanwhile, electricity generators want to know how the market will work after the Australian energy market operator took control of it on Wednesday. They want to know how much they're going to get paid, that's fairly reasonable, and how long the suspension will last, among other things. It is a mess, the energy market at the moment.
Yeah, it sure is. It is a crisis, really, in every sense of the word. Now, moving away from energy, Sean, the foreign affairs ministers of Australia and New Zealand have met amid a few challenges in the region.
Yes, they discussed the importance of the existing Pacific Islands Forum and canvassed human rights, climate change and threats to the rules-based order. Australia's Penny Wong stressed that the Albanese government had a different view of climate change to its predecessor. Also, Michael, Deputy Prime Minister and Defence Minister Richard Marles yesterday said he'll head to India next week, seeking to strengthen defence ties with that country. The Albanese government is certainly working hard on international relations.
Yeah, setting a cracking pace. Now, the New South Wales Coalition Government and the Victorian Labor Government, Sean, have joined together to announce some pretty big changes to the early education sector, and every child will be offered a free place in preschool within the next decade.
This is monumental. This is a major reform by the two most populous states. Basically, kids will start school at the age of 3 or 4. They'll also be screened for development issues or otherwise. This is a great step forward in terms of particularly helping kids who are a bit more disadvantaged at an earlier age. Now, Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews said it will save families about $2,500 a year. It will also give children every chance for the best start in life, he said. And importantly, it provides women with greater choice and opportunity. Pretty remarkable that a Labor state government and a Liberal state government got together to do this.
Yeah, I think it's a terrific story. Now, Sean, you mentioned earlier Link Group, and the company's share price fell by nearly 11% yesterday, and it appears arbitrage funds have dumped the stock.
Yes. Now, Link, of course, is under takeover offer from Canada's Dye and Durham, but the funding of that bid is under stress, according to media reports, and the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission outlined some concerns about the deal yesterday. Arbitrage funds take positions in stocks hoping to benefit from misinformation in the market. Now, in Link's case, Dye and Durham had bid about 40% more than what its share price was trading. Arbitrage funds had bought into the stock, hoping the bid will go ahead. But it seems those arbitrage funds are now cutting their losses, taking the view that the bid won't get across the line and dumping Link shares, hence the 11% drop yesterday.
The Reject Shop, Sean, has tapped a former Bunnings executive to take over as CEO of the retailer.
Phil Bishop will take over in the middle of next month and says his aim is to expand the store network from its current 367 outlets and become closer to customers. Mr. Bishop spent about 30 years in retail, Target, Officeworks, Bunnings. Investors certainly welcomed the announcement. The retailer's share price jumped 18% yesterday.
All right, a couple of smaller stories, Sean. Oil and gas giant Chevron has awarded ASX-listed Worley a 10-year global master services agreement.
That means the engineering group will provide services to all Chevron's assets for the next decade. A good win for Worley's.
Yeah, absolutely. Eagers Automotive says it will buy back 10% of its shares.
The decision by the largest car dealership business in Australia shows that management is pretty happy with how things are going at the moment. Its share price jumped 5% yesterday.
We've been following the story of Bubs Australia, which has sent plane loads of infant formula to the US. And now there's another development, Sean.
Yes, Bubs has entered into an agreement with Walmart to sell infant formula products in 800 stores. Walmart, of course, is the gorilla of department store retailing in the US, and the tins of formula are already on their way to the US to those stores. Bubs' share price was up 9% yesterday.
Do you reckon the people at Bubs can believe what's happened
No.
there? Like if you were to go back kind of even just a period of weeks, suddenly then they fast forward to now and they've got these incredible deals in the US and global exposure, and it's just quite remarkable.
Oh, they hit the lottery. I mean, it was less than 4 weeks ago that they did the deal, and Joe Biden mentioned Bubs Australia as saving infants in the US because they had a problem with one of the major factories in Michigan. There was a contamination issue. They reached out to other places around the world, opened the way for Bubs to sell into that market, sent planes to actually pick up the infant formula, and off you go. Bubs' share price almost doubled in that 4 weeks.
And pretty impressive that Bubs was able to meet the demand as well.
Yes, I thought exactly that. It's been obviously able to pick up production very, very quickly.
Yeah, it's just such a good story all round, actually. This isn't the Bubs podcast, but it is definitely a story that's worthy of discussion.
Yeah.
And finally, Sean, Melbourne has secured a 10-year extension to the contract to host the Grand Prix.
Yes, the current deal ends in 2025, and now Melbourne will host what is normally the opening race of the season until 2035.
All right, moving on to overseas news. China is moving to gain some control over iron ore prices, setting up a centrally controlled group to purchase the ore.
Yeah, Beijing hopes the new entity can secure lower prices through larger bulk purchases made on several companies' behalf. The project will also seek to boost domestic iron ore output in China and organise bigger investments in overseas mines, according to the Financial Times. Of course, this has major ramifications for Australia and its big three miners who provide the large bulk of ore to China. That ore is used to create about 1 billion tonnes of steel a year.
That is just huge, isn't it? Sean, the New Zealand economy unexpectedly shrank during the March quarter as COVID accelerated through the population and interest rates soared.
It's a bit of a cautionary tale, this one. The Reserve Bank of New Zealand has been lifting interest rates for a while, and that's hit the economy hard. The New Zealand economy contracted by 0.2% during the first 3 months of this year. For the full 12 months, the economy expanded by just 1.2%. The problem is that rates are likely to keep rising, given inflation in New Zealand is heading towards 7%, which is exactly where Australia's inflation rate is headed.
And finally, Sean, here's a story for all the dreamers out there, and actually probably in here as well, because I'd probably put myself in that category. The Julius Baer Group's 2022 Global Wealth and Lifestyle Report says Shanghai is the most expensive city to live in when you are really, really rich.
Yes, I find this somewhat of a contradiction in terms here, ranking the most expensive cities for the ultra-rich. Do they care?
Probably not.
No.
It's just a minor inconvenience, or not even that.
Yeah. Look, the report considers the cost of residential property, cars, airfares, business schools, other luxuries, all those things that we all need to know about. Shanghai came in at number 1, followed by London. Tokyo went from 3 to 8, while New York didn't even make the top 10. Now, the biggest hike in prices came in technology, smartphones, laptops and things. Hiring a lawyer also became much, much more expensive, up 33%, while bike prices jumped 30%. Fortunately, wine prices fell about 30%. I just love the fact that hiring a lawyer is even a consideration.
That is fantastic, isn't it? It's sport, really, isn't it? So it'd be the equivalent of buying a tennis racket, say.
For you and I, yeah.
Now, Sean, up next, we talked a lot about it at the beginning of the show. You are speaking to Carlos Cacho, the chief economist at Jarden Australia.
Yeah, Carlos knows his stuff. We run through what all the data and financial market action over the past week or so means for the Australian economy and house prices significantly.
Yeah, it's a great chat, and Carlos may or may not be joining you on your family holiday to Hawaii. The interview is coming up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Friday, the 17th of June, 2022. Make sure you're following the podcast. Join us online on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. And don't forget, if you are a listener of our Safe Word podcast, which comes out once a week, it now comes out on Thursdays on its own playlist. You must search for Safe Word by Fear and Greed wherever you listen to podcasts, and make sure you hit subscribe or follow. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.